German generals ridiculed U.S. logistics as clumsy and inefficient until the Red Ball Express proved them catastrophically wrong. June 1944, Normandy coastline. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stands in his command bunker, studying intelligence reports about American supply operations with dismissive laughter. To the Wehrmacht's finest minds, logistics meant precise calculations and minimal waste, not the apparent chaos of American abundance. They saw trucks where they expected tanks, supply lines where they anticipated swift strikes. What they couldn't comprehend was witnessing the birth of industrial warfare itself. General George S. Patton's Third Army sat poised for the fastest advance in military history, but only if an unprecedented logistical miracle could keep his tanks fueled and his men fed. Behind enemy lines, 20,000 African-American soldiers prepared to drive 6,000 trucks in the most daring supply operation ever attempted. How could these overlooked heroes transform Patton's stalled offensive into an unstoppable Blitzkrieg that would shatter German resistance forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete bunker, buried deep beneath the French countryside, 20 miles inland from the Normandy beaches. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel adjusted his Africa Corps cap and leaned over the situation map, his weathered fingers tracing the Allied positions with practiced precision. The date was June 15, 1944, and the German High Command was still reeling from the audacity of D-Day, but Rommel felt confident in his assessment of American capabilities. Mein Herr, his intelligence officer reported, spreading reconnaissance photographs across the oak table, the Americans are moving massive quantities of supplies across the beaches. Our observers count over 10,000 trucks already landed. Rommel's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Trucks, Oberst Weber? They bring us trucks while we prepare panzers? He gestured toward the map where red pins marked German armor concentrations. This confirms everything we know about American military doctrine. They mistake quantity for quality. Logistics for leadership. The bunker's occupants, a collection of Germany's most experienced commanders, nodded in agreement. They had witnessed German precision overcome numerical superiority countless times across Poland, France, and Russia. The Wehrmacht's philosophy emphasized speed, tactical brilliance, and efficient resource utilization. To these battle-hardened veterans, the American emphasis on supply chains represented a fundamental misunderstanding of modern warfare. Their General Patton sits idle while his supply clerks count cans of food, observed General Oberste. Heinrich von Lüttwitz, commander of the 2nd Panzer Division. We need soldiers, not shopkeepers. Speed and audacity win battles, not accounting ledgers. Rommel studied the intelligence estimates more carefully. American production figures seemed almost fantastical. 30,000 tanks manufactured monthly, 60,000 trucks rolling off assembly lines each week. But these numbers only reinforced his conviction that Americans confused industrial capacity with military effectiveness. They fight like merchants, he declared, believing money can purchase victory. The German generals had witnessed their own army's remarkable achievements with limited resources. The Africa Corps had nearly reached Cairo with supply lines stretched across 1,500 miles of desert. The Eastern Front demonstrated daily how superior tactics and training could overcome material disadvantages. In their experience, excessive logistics actually hindered military effectiveness by creating dependency and slowing decisive action. Our panzer divisions require only fuel and ammunition, Rommel continued, pointing to German positions. Their columns require refrigerated food, medical supplies, entertainment equipment, even ice cream factories. This reveals weakness, not strength. Unknown to these confident German officers, their dismissive assessment was about to encounter the full force of American industrial democracy unleashed upon European battlefields. The Wehrmacht's contempt for logistics would prove their most catastrophic miscalculation. 300 miles away, in a canvas command tent pitched among the Norman hedgerows, General George Smith Patton, Jr. paced like a caged predator. His polished boots clicked against wooden planks as he studied maps marking his Third Army's positions, his ivory-handled revolvers catching lamplight with each aggressive gesture. Patton's legendary temper was approaching its breaking point. "God damn it, Bradley!" He shouted into the field telephone, his voice carrying across the tent. "My boys are sitting here with their thumbs up their asses while Jerry digs in deeper every hour we wait." General Omar Bradley's voice crackled through the static, explaining supply difficulties and coordination challenges. But Patton had heard enough excuses. The tent flaps burst open as Colonel Oscar Koch, Patton's intelligence chief, entered with the latest reconnaissance reports. "General, German armor is repositioning toward Falaise. If we don't move within 48 hours, they'll establish defensive positions that could halt our advance for weeks." Patton slammed his fist on the map table, causing compass and rulers to jump. "I know what those Nazi bastards are thinking. They expect us to crawl forward like some goddamn snail begging for supplies every mile of the way." His eyes blazed with frustrated ambition. "Speed is everything, Koch. Stop moving, and you're dead. Keep moving, and you win wars." The general's strategic genius lay in understanding momentum's psychological impact. Patton knew that rapid advances shattered enemy morale, while hesitation allowed opponents to regroup and strengthen defenses. His success in Sicily proved that audacious leadership could overcome superior numbers. But only if logistics supported aggressive movement, sir. The quartermasters report fuel shortages, reported Major Charles Codman, Patton's aide-de-camp. Current reserves support perhaps 72 hours of intensive operations. Patton's expression darkened further. His Third Army contained 240,000 men organized into 12 divisions, 4 armored and 8 infantry. These forces consumed staggering quantities of supplies, 400,000 gallons of gasoline daily during active operations, 1,500 tons of ammunition per division engaged in combat, 600 tons of food and medical supplies distributed continuously across dispersed units. "Those sons of bitches in the rear echelons don't understand what we're fighting for," Patton growled, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Every hour we sit here gives Hitler's boys more time to murder civilians and fortify positions. My men are ready to charge through hell itself, but without fuel. Their tanks become expensive metal coffins." The general walked to his tent's entrance, staring across fields where thousands of American soldiers waited for orders. Many had survived the brutal Normandy landings only to face indefinite delays, while supply chains stretched to accommodate unprecedented logistical demands. Patton understood that warfare's fundamental equation had changed. Victory belonged to armies that could sustain movement, not merely initiate it. As evening descended over the Norman countryside, a different kind of preparation was taking place 6,000 miles away in the industrial heartland of America. The River Rouge plant in Dearborn, Michigan, operated at capacity 24 hours daily, its assembly lines producing instruments of victory with mechanical precision that German observers would have found incomprehensible. Margaret. Thompson adjusted her safety goggles and resumed, welding steel plates that would become fuel tanks for military trucks. Around her, 15,000 workers, men and women, black and white, immigrants and native-born Americans, contributed their skills to an industrial mobilization unprecedented in human history. The scene represented democracy's productive power unleashed against totalitarian aggression. Another shift. Another 100 trucks closer to victory, called James Washington, a crane operator whose son served with the 761st Tank Battalion. The factory's diversity reflected America's commitment to inclusive participation in the war effort, though racial tensions still created challenges that military planners struggled to address constructively. The statistics emerging from American factories defied German comprehension. Ford's Willow Run plant manufactured one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour at peak production. Chrysler's tank arsenal produced 1,500 Sherman tanks monthly. General Motors converted entire facilities to produce everything from aircraft engines to ammunition. Demonstrating capitalism's flexibility when directed toward common purpose, Henry Kaiser's shipyards in California assembled Liberty ships using revolutionary construction techniques that reduced building time from 365 days to 42 days. American steel production reached 90 million tons annually, more than Germany and Japan combined. This industrial tsunami was preparing to overwhelm Axis forces through sheer productive superiority. In a segregated section of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Staff Sergeant William Daniels checked his maintenance logs one final time before tomorrow's convoy departure. The 3348th Quartermaster Truck Company prepared for deployment to Europe, though none of these African-American soldiers knew they would soon participate in the most crucial logistical operation of World War II. Sergeant Daniels called Captain Edwin Bradley, the unit's white commanding officer, final equipment inspection at or 600 hours. Make sure your boys understand the importance of this mission. Daniels nodded respectfully while privately noting the casual racism that permeated military culture. These boys were experienced mechanics, drivers, and logistics specialists whose skills would prove essential to Allied victory. Yet military segregation relegated them to support roles regardless of their capabilities. The Red Ball Express was about to transform military history, though neither German generals nor American planners fully grasped the revolutionary implications of marrying American industrial capacity with innovative logistics doctrine. The pre-dawn darkness of August 25, 1944, was shattered by the rumble of diesel engines across the Normandy beachhead. Staff Sergeant William Daniels gripped the steering wheel of his 2.5-ton truck, leading the first convoy of what would become known as the Red Ball Express. Behind him, 132 identical trucks loaded with precious cargo, fuel, ammunition, food, and medical supplies, prepared for the 400-mile journey to Patton's advancing Third Army. Remember, drivers, Captain Bradley's voice crackled through the radio, this highway belongs to us now. No civilian traffic, no other military units. Just Red Ball Express convoys moving supplies to the front lines. The newly designated Red Ball Highway stretched from the Normandy beaches through liberated French territory, a dedicated supply artery that would revolutionize military logistics forever. Daniels had driven supply convoys before, but nothing approaching this scale. The inaugural Red Ball Express mission involved 5,400 trucks operated by 23,000 soldiers, predominantly African-American units reassigned from various quartermaster companies. These men understood their mission's critical importance. Patton's advance had outpaced conventional supply lines by nearly 200 miles, leaving his tanks dangerously low on fuel just as German resistance began stiffening around Metz. The convoy rolled through sleeping French villages, past burned-out German equipment, and hastily abandoned defensive positions. Local civilians emerged from their homes to wave at the passing trucks, understanding instinctively that these supplies represented liberation's continuation. Children ran alongside the vehicles, shouting, "Merci, America!" While elderly villagers crossed themselves in gratitude, Daniels calculated distances and fuel consumption with practiced efficiency. Each truck carried 6 tons of supplies across terrain damaged by months of warfare. Bridges required careful navigation due to weight restrictions, while roads cratered by artillery demanded constant vigilance. The average speed, 35 miles per hour, seemed impossibly slow for such an urgent mission. Yet these convoys moved faster and more reliably than any supply system previously deployed in military history. At 1,400 hours, the convoy encountered its first serious challenge. German Messerschmitt fighters appeared on the horizon, diving toward the exposed trucks with machine guns chattering. Daniels yanked his steering wheel hard right, driving into a roadside ditch as bullets sparked off pavement where his truck had been moments before. "Stay with your vehicles!" Captain Bradley shouted over the radio. "Protect the cargo." The drivers crouched beside their trucks, returning fire with mounted .50 caliber machine guns, while Luftwaffe fighters made repeated strafing runs. 2 trucks burst into flames, their precious fuel creating pillars of black smoke visible for miles, but the convoy pressed forward. Within 30 minutes, P-51 Mustang fighters arrived to drive off the German attackers, and Red Ball Express trucks resumed their crucial mission. This scene would repeat dozens of times over the following months. Enemy interdiction attempts met by American determination and growing air superiority. 300 miles ahead, General Patton studied his fuel reports with growing satisfaction. The first Red Ball Express deliveries had arrived at his forward supply depots exactly on schedule, carrying 4,500 tons of desperately needed materials. His tanks could resume their advance, maintaining the momentum that German defenders found impossible to counter. "By God, those truckers are magnificent," Patton declared to his staff. "They're not just moving supplies, they're moving victory itself." The general's appreciation for logistics had evolved dramatically since his North African campaigns. He now understood that modern warfare required industrial support systems as sophisticated as tactical doctrine. In his command bunker near Metz, Field Marshal Rommel studied intelligence reports with growing alarm. American forces were advancing at unprecedented speed, their supply lines functioning with mechanical efficiency that defied German military experience. "How is this possible?" he asked his operations officer. "Their logistics should be collapsing under such strain." Oberst Weber spread aerial reconnaissance photographs across the conference table. "Mein Herr, our observers report continuous truck convoys moving day and night along dedicated highways. The scale appears enormous, perhaps 6,000 vehicles operating simultaneously." Rommel examined the photographs carefully, his experienced eye noting details that revealed American logistical sophistication. Fuel depots, ammunition dumps, and medical stations were positioned at precisely calculated intervals. Supply trucks moved in coordinated formations protected by fighter aircraft. This wasn't improvised transportation, it was industrial warfare perfected. "They have created a supply machine," Rommel observed grimly. "We prepare for battles against armies, but they bring us factories." The field marshal was beginning to comprehend that traditional military thinking was obsolete when confronting American productive capacity German. Intelligence estimated that Red Ball Express convoys delivered 12,500 tons of supplies daily to Allied forces. This figure exceeded the entire German army's daily consumption by substantial margins. American trucks moved more material in 1 week than German railways could transport in 1 month. Despite operating across war-damaged territory under constant threat of air attack, the psychological impact on German forces was immediate and devastating. Wehrmacht units accustomed to supply shortages watched American troops advancing with unlimited fuel, fresh food, and abundant ammunition. German soldiers captured in these engagements expressed bewilderment at American material abundance. Individual GIs carried more equipment than entire German squads possessed. Major General Lucius Clay, Chief of European Logistics, reviewed Red Ball Express statistics with amazement. "Gentlemen, we are witnessing the transformation of military science," he announced to his staff. "These truck convoys represent more than transportation. They are America's industrial democracy projected onto European battlefields." The numbers told an extraordinary story. Red Ball Express trucks traveled 1.5 million miles daily, consuming 300,000 gallons of fuel to deliver supplies worth millions of dollars to frontline units. This logistical achievement required coordination among dozens of military units, civilian contractors, and Allied governments, a demonstration of democratic organization that totalitarian regimes could not replicate. By September 15th, the Red Ball Express had transported over 400,000 tons of supplies to Patton's Third Army, enabling advances that compressed months of conventional warfare into weeks of breakthrough operations. German defensive lines established over years crumbled within days when confronted by American forces that never paused for resupply delays. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. October 3rd, 1944. The ancient city of Metz had witnessed countless battles throughout its 2,000-year history, but nothing approaching the industrial tempest now engulfing its medieval walls. General Patton stood atop a captured German bunker, watching his Third Army's tanks roll through streets that had been German-occupied since 1940. Behind the armored spearheads, Red Ball Express trucks arrived every 15 minutes, disgorging supplies that kept the American advance moving at speeds that shattered all military precedent. "Sir, the 4th Armored Division reports breakthrough at Chateau Salins," Colonel Koch announced, consulting the latest radio traffic. "They're advancing 25 miles ahead of schedule because fuel resupply arrived exactly on time." Patton's satisfaction was evident in his fierce grin. The Red Ball Express had evolved from emergency measure to revolutionary doctrine, proving that modern warfare belonged to nations capable of projecting industrial power across continental distances. His Third Army now consumed 800,000 gallons of gasoline daily during active operations, more fuel than entire German army groups possessed in their strategic reserves. The statistics were staggering. Since August 25th, Red Ball Express convoys had delivered 1.2 million tons of supplies across 6,000 truck routes spanning liberated France. This logistical achievement supported not only Patton's advance, but simultaneous operations by Bradley's 1st Army and Montgomery's 21st Army. Group. American industrial capacity was overwhelming German resistance. Through sheer material superiority, Staff Sergeant Daniels guided his convoy through the rubble-strewn streets of newly liberated Verdun, site of the Great War's most horrific battles. French civilians cheered from damaged buildings, understanding that these American trucks represented more than military supplies. They carried liberation itself. The contrast with 1916's static warfare was profound. Mobility had replaced attrition as warfare's governing principle. "Sergeant," radioed Private Johnson from the following truck, "German prisoners are staring at our convoy like they've seen ghosts." Indeed, captured Wehrmacht soldiers displayed expressions of bewildered disbelief as hundreds of American supply trucks passed their temporary holding areas. These veterans of multiple campaigns had never witnessed logistical operations on such scale. The psychological effect on German morale was catastrophic. Wehrmacht intelligence reports described American supply convoys with terms typically reserved for natural disasters: unstoppable, overwhelming, beyond comprehension. German soldiers, accustomed to fighting with inadequate supplies and obsolete equipment, faced enemies who seemed to possess unlimited resources. In his headquarters near Nancy, Field Marshal Rommel reviewed casualty reports with growing despair. German forces were not merely losing battles, they were being systematically overwhelmed by American material abundance. Captured German officers reported that American units discarded equipment worth thousands of dollars rather than transport it, demonstrating wealth that German commanders found incomprehensible. "They fight like rich men," observed General Oberst von Manteuffel, commander of the 5th Panzer Army. "When their tanks need fuel, trucks appear immediately. When their men need food, supplies arrive within hours. We fight like beggars against millionaires." Rommel nodded grimly. German forces had adapted to resource scarcity throughout the war, developing tactics that maximized limited assets. But these techniques proved useless against opponents who solved logistical problems through massive resource allocation rather than careful conservation. American abundance negated German efficiency. The strategic implications extended far beyond individual battles. German industrial production, already strained by Allied bombing and resource shortages, could not match American output under optimal conditions. With German factories under constant air attack and raw materials increasingly scarce, the production gap was widening catastrophically. American factories were producing 50,000 trucks monthly, while German plants struggled to manufacture 2,000 vehicles of all types. U.S. steel production reached 90 million tons annually compared to Germany's 35 million tons. American shipyards launched more vessels each month than the entire German Navy possessed. These statistics represented national power projected through industrial capacity. The Red Ball Express embodied this transformation. By November 1944, the system operated 7,500 trucks daily along 2,400 miles of dedicated highways. These convoys delivered supplies worth $50 million monthly to frontline units, supporting advances that compressed traditional campaign timelines from years to months. Captain Bradley observed his drivers with growing pride as they prepared for another dangerous supply run. "Men, you may not be carrying rifles, but you're carrying victory itself," he addressed the assembled truck crews. "Every gallon of fuel you deliver keeps our tanks moving. Every crate of ammunition you transport shortens this war." The African-American soldiers of the U.S. Red Ball Express understood their mission's historical significance despite facing racial discrimination within the military hierarchy. They were proving that democratic ideals, however imperfectly implemented, could mobilize human resources more effectively than totalitarian systems based on racial supremacy. Sergeant Daniels checked his route map one final time before departing on another convoy mission. The highways of liberated France had become arteries of American industrial power, pumping lifeblood to advancing armies with mechanical precision. These truck routes represented more than logistics. They were democracy's answer to tyranny, capitalism's response to fascism, freedom's challenge to oppression. German resistance was crumbling not from superior tactics or better equipment, but from confrontation with American society's productive capacity unleashed for military purposes. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that free peoples, properly organized and adequately equipped, could overcome any totalitarian regime, regardless of its military traditions or tactical sophistication. As winter approached, the strategic situation had reversed completely from German expectations. Wehrmacht forces, designed for rapid offensive operations, found themselves conducting desperate defensive battles against enemies who possessed unlimited supplies and growing air superiority. The war's outcome was no longer in doubt. Only its duration remained. Uncertain, December 16, 1944. The Weiss Ardennes forest erupted in German artillery fire as Hitler launched his final, desperate gamble, Operation Watch on the Rhine, later known as the Battle of the Bulge. Field Marshal von Rundstedt had concentrated Germany's last strategic reserves for one massive offensive, hoping to split Allied forces and recapture the vital port of Antwerp. But the Wehrmacht's final throw of the dice would demonstrate definitively why the Red Ball Express had already determined the war's outcome. General Patton received the emergency call at his headquarters in Nancy at 0430 hours. "Sir, German armor has broken through at Bastogne," reported Colonel Koch urgently. "Brad needs the Third Army to wheel north immediately." Most commanders would have required weeks to redeploy an entire army across 150 miles of winter terrain. Patton promised movement within 72 hours. "Gentlemen," Patton addressed his staff officers, his voice calm despite the crisis, "this is what we've been preparing for. Jerry thinks he can surprise us with old-fashioned Blitzkrieg tactics. He's about to learn that the Red Ball Express gives us mobility he can't match." The general's confidence reflected his complete faith in American logistical superiority. The redeployment of Patton's Third Army represented the Red Ball Express's finest hour. Within 48 hours, 7,500 trucks were moving 240,000 soldiers, 1,800 tanks, and 40,000 tons of supplies across icy French highways toward the embattled Belgian front. This logistical achievement, reorienting an entire field army in midwinter, would have been impossible without the supply infrastructure created over the previous 4 months. Staff Sergeant Daniels led his convoy through the snow-covered landscape, maintaining speeds that German observers found incredible given weather conditions. American trucks equipped with tire chains and winterization equipment continued operating in temperatures that immobilized German vehicles designed for temperate climates. Keep those intervals tight. Daniels radioed to his following drivers. "Jerry's counting on this weather to slow us down. We're going to prove him wrong." The Red Ball Express had evolved into more than a supply system. It had become the physical manifestation of American determination to overcome any obstacle through industrial application. In the Ardennes, German forces initially achieved tactical surprise and local superiority. But their offensive immediately encountered the same logistical constraints that had plagued Wehrmacht operations throughout 1944. German tanks, designed to capture enemy fuel supplies, found American depots either evacuated or destroyed. Within 72 hours, German spearheads were immobilized by fuel shortages, while American reinforcements arrived continuously. Oberst Weber reviewed intelligence reports with growing alarm. Mynheer, American truck convoys are converging on the Ardennes from 6 different directions. Our estimates suggest they are moving 15,000 tons of supplies daily, despite winter conditions. Rommel studied the situation maps with professional admiration for his enemy's capabilities. They have created a supply machine that operates regardless of weather, terrain, or tactical situation, he observed. We attack with the weapons we possess, but they respond with the weapons they can manufacture. The contrast was stark and decisive. German forces committed to the Ardennes offensive represented Hitler's last mobile reserves, units that could not be replaced when destroyed. American forces responding to the crisis were supported by industrial production that manufactured replacement equipment faster than combat could consume it. American factories were producing 2,000 tanks monthly, while German plants struggled to complete 200 vehicles. U.S. ammunition production exceeded German output by ratios approaching 10:1. Most critically, American fuel refineries produced more gasoline daily than German strategic reserves contained totally. The Battle of the Bulge lasted 37 days and resulted in complete German defeat. American casualties were significant, 19,000 killed and 47,500 wounded, but German losses were catastrophic and irreplaceable. More importantly, the Wehrmacht's final offensive had been broken not by superior tactics, but by logistics that German planners could not comprehend. By January 25, 1945, German forces were retreating across the Rhine River, their last natural defensive barrier breached by American armies that advanced without pause for resupply delays. The Red Ball Express had evolved into a continental logistics network supporting simultaneous operations from the North Sea to the Swiss border. General Eisenhower visited a Red Ball Express depot near Liège, addressing the assembled truck drivers with evident emotion. Men, you may never see your names in history books, but you have changed history itself, he declared. Every mile you drive brings victory closer. Every ton you deliver saves American lives. The statistical achievement was unprecedented in military history. The Red Ball Express had transported 4.5 million tons of supplies across 12 million vehicle miles of European highways. This logistical system supported the liberation of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands while enabling advances into Germany itself. Staff Sergeant Daniels reflected on his experiences as the war neared its end. We weren't just moving supplies, he wrote to his family in Alabama. We were moving America itself, our factories, our determination, our belief that free people could overcome any tyranny if they worked together. The broader implications extended far beyond World War II. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that industrial democracies possessed inherent advantages over totalitarian regimes in sustained conflicts. Free societies could mobilize human and material resources more effectively than systems based on coercion and racial ideology. American industrial production during World War II exceeded the combined output of all Axis nations by substantial margins. This productive superiority reflected democratic values that encouraged innovation, rewarded initiative, and utilized talents regardless of race or gender. The Red Ball Express embodied these principles in action. Field Marshal Rommel, now a prisoner of war, observed American logistical operations with professional fascination. They have revolutionized warfare itself, he admitted to his interrogators. Future armies will be judged not by their tactical brilliance, but by their industrial support. The Americans understood this before anyone else. The transformation was complete and irreversible. Modern warfare belonged to nations capable of projecting industrial power across global distances. Military victory required not only brave soldiers and skilled commanders, but also factories, highways, and supply systems that could sustain operations indefinitely. As VE Day approached, the Red Ball Express continued operating at full capacity, now supporting occupation forces and humanitarian relief efforts. These trucks that had carried ammunition and fuel now transported food and medical supplies to liberated populations, demonstrating democracy's commitment to reconstruction as well as destruction. The legacy endured long after the shooting stopped. American military doctrine incorporated lessons learned from the Red Ball Express, emphasizing logistics as a decisive factor in modern warfare. The interstate highway system, begun in the 1950s, reflected understanding that national defense required rapid transportation networks capable of supporting continental military operations. The men who drove those trucks, predominantly African-American soldiers initially relegated to support roles, had proven that democratic ideals, however imperfectly implemented, could mobilize human potential more effectively than any totalitarian system. Their contributions demanded recognition and helped accelerate the civil rights movement that would transform American society. The Red Ball Express represented more than military logistics. It embodied American democracy's response to totalitarian aggression. Free peoples, properly organized and adequately equipped, had demonstrated their ability to overcome any tyranny through industrial application and unwavering determination. This lesson resonated through subsequent decades as America faced new challenges requiring similar mobilization of national resources. The highway signs marking Red Ball Express routes disappeared after the war, but the principles they represented became permanent features of American strategic thinking. Victory belonged to nations that could sustain their forces indefinitely, replacing losses faster than enemies could inflict them, maintaining advances longer than opponents could resist them. In the end, German generals who had ridiculed American logistics learned the hard truth. Wars are won not only by heroes and weapons, but by the industrial capacity to keep heroes supplied and weapons functioning. The Red Ball Express had proven that democracy's greatest weapon was not any particular technology, but the ability to harness free people's productive energy for common purpose. As the war came to an end in 1945, the Red Ball Express stood as a testament not only to the logistical brilliance that powered General Patton's Blitzkrieg, but to the unsung heroes who ensured that the machinery of war kept rolling forward. These soldiers, often relegated to the background, had become the very lifeblood of the Allied advance. While the world celebrated the victory in Europe and the defeat of fascism, the contributions of the African-American soldiers who manned the convoys of the Red Ball Express were largely overlooked. Yet their role in the liberation of Europe, though unrecognized at the time, would echo through history, shaping the trajectory of civil rights movements in America for years to come. The Red Ball Express had been more than a logistical marvel. It was a symbol of how democracy, with its chaotic abundance and imperfect system, could outmatch even the most calculated efficiency of its enemies. The system they had created was nothing short of revolutionary, a blueprint for the modern era that would be utilized in countless conflicts to come. Staff Sergeant William Daniels, whose name never made it into the official records as a war hero, returned home to Alabama after the war. The world had changed, and so had he. The experiences of those long drives through war-torn Europe, the camaraderie formed in the face of gunfire and uncertainty, shaped his views of both the world and his place in it. In 1948, just 3 years after the war's end, President Harry S. Truman issued an executive order desegregating the armed forces. While the recognition came too late for many of the soldiers who had fought in the Red Ball Express, it was the beginning of a broader cultural shift in America. The soldiers who had kept Patton's tanks fueled and his men fed now had their own fight to engage in, this time one of civil rights, justice, and equality. The victory in Europe had been hard-earned, and it was not just the soldiers with rifles and tanks who had secured it. It was the quiet heroes, the drivers, the mechanics, the support staff, who, like the wheels of the Red Ball Express, kept the machine running. Their endurance, determination, and resilience were the underpinnings of a new world, one that recognized the importance of not just might, but of unity and organization. Years later, when World War II would be remembered in textbooks and films, the Red Ball Express would be written into the annals of military history as a defining moment. Yet the men who served would continue to carry the weight of a war won not just with tanks, bullets, and strategy, but with the drive of thousands of unsung heroes moving toward the horizon, relentlessly propelling the fight for freedom forward. And so, the legacy of the Red Ball Express endured, not just in the roads that once crisscrossed war-torn Europe, but in the ideals of a nation that, despite its flaws, had learned the value of unity, hard work, and the recognition that victory belongs to those who are often least seen, but most essential. Though the Red Ball Express faded into the past, its impact on the future was unmistakable. It showed the world that victory does not come from force alone. It comes from the ability to sustain that force, to keep it supplied, to make every soldier and every weapon count, no matter the cost. And in the years that followed, as the United States faced the challenges of the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, and the struggles of a changing world, the lessons of the Red Ball Express would continue to inspire future generations to believe in the power of logistics, teamwork, and the unyielding pursuit of victory, even when the road ahead seemed long and uncertain. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.